The Armenian Genocide was like a trial run for those, right? A learning lesson for Hitler and things like that, right? Points to it, talks about it, uses it as a case study. And so I don't think it's talked about enough because certain geopolitical things, and mostly in my opinion, but it hopefully gets more spotlights as time goes on.
Hey guys, what's going on? Arman here, and today I have a very special guest, Matt Schmitt. How are you?
I'm good, man. Thanks for the invite.
So, this is such an important conversation for me and for everyone that's listening. And I thought that we had to, talk about it. So, the thing that Matt and I, among other things that we have in common, is that we're both Armenian. And so, you know, we wanted to just I want you, Matt, to introduce a little bit yourself and tell about your background, and then we
Yeah.
can go a little bit about how this everything Armenia applied to everyone listening.
Sure. Yeah. So yeah, I appreciate the invite. Like I said, my name is Matt Schmitt. I don't know, that doesn't sound Armenian, but I'm 50% Armenian on my mother's side. It always throws people off when I say my last name. But that kind of goes into my story too. We can get a bit into that later. But I am a small business owner. That's how we met. I've been on my own outside of the corporate world for almost a decade. Really been doing my own thing on the side. Before that, for several years before that, I came out of college in the Great Recession. I live here in St. Louis, Missouri. I wanted a job at Anheuser-Busch, which is pretty much what everybody wanted to work if you live in St. Louis, because my dad worked there for 30 years. My mother-in-law worked there for 30 years. My uncle worked there for 30 years. My brother at the time had worked there for about 5 years. So it was in my blood. And when I got out, the Great Recession was in full swing. The people that I knew a year before, I had a 5-year degree. The guys that graduated before all got jobs. Then the recession really hit. Terrible timing on my part, and I had an IT degree. Very bad industry to try to get into at that time. And so I kind of stumbled around for a while, started trying to do my own thing. Like I said, IT degree. So I started trying to make my own website. But the thing here was, I wasn't educated in creating my own business and scaling and doing anything. There wasn't a lot of space. This isn't long enough ago where there wasn't even Facebook ads at the time. There wasn't even a mobile. You barely had iPhones back then. It was a whole nother world. And so I started trying to do some stuff, but I ended up getting a job because my priority was getting out of my parents' basement and marrying my girlfriend. So I started working for Anheuser-Busch as kind of a contractor. They gave me maybe 30 hours. Sometimes it was 25, not exactly a stable income. So I continued to try to do my own thing. I worked for AB for a couple of years, trying to scrap by, waiting for the economy to kind of turn around. Tried one thing after another, and it ended up leaving a couple of years after that, after doing very well there, finding my way into procurement of all things, but started trying to grow my own company, focused heavily on the e-commerce space and apparel, and we really blew that up, acquired an e-commerce solutions company, part of an e-commerce solutions company along the way. And I actually sold the e-commerce company that I had very recently, and then took over as CEO of my e-commerce solution company, SCUP. So we have kind of been focused there, creating tools to help people essentially do, what I did in a better way. And I think I'm perfectly positioned with my history if things in the economy continue to go the way that they're going. As a person that started in the Great Recession, to kind of do that. So that's kind of my purpose moving forward, as well as my background.
Okay, understood, Matt. So that's very cool. So you sell your company, your e-com company, and now you're helping other people start their own e-com companies with your solutions. Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly.
And so, um, tell me, on the Armenian side, why is that important to you? Because you could have been like a lot of everyone, like, yeah, just I have this is my DNA, this is who I
Right.
am, just, that's it. Why is that important to you?
My grandfather, my mom's dad on my side, it was a big influence on my life. He was, he grew up went to, I have this awesome picture of him. He was 18 years old, getting onto the USS George Washington. And he basically was pushed into you're an engineer now, right? Kind of role, fixing guns and stuff like that on the boats. So that started his entrepreneurial career. So when he came back, he started his company, fixing radios, fixing mechanical, whatever back then, right? TVs, anything like that. And then he got into computers. And I have a very critical moment, like one of these moments that kind of shape your life. And I talk about this a lot. I have two older brothers. I have one younger brother, but I have two older brothers. And we were all over at my grandparents' house, and they were out playing. They wanted me to come out. My grandpa was working on a computer, and I was just intrigued by it. And I think he noticed that and sat me down and showed me everything from start to finish, and really took care with it. And that sparked my interest into the world that I've developed. That's almost a focal point of everything that I've built and everything that I've done, everything I'm sitting in right now, and everything like that could be maybe traced back to that moment of my initial interest was nurtured. And so that's my love of my grandpa. And he was very big and passionate about trying to make sure that we respected the Armenian culture, and we grew up and we went to we have a church not too far from here. It's about 45 minutes. Getting out and meeting other people, and respecting and understanding culture. I didn't appreciate that as much. I was young, so I didn't appreciate it. He died when I was 14. I didn't appreciate it as much when I was growing up as I do now. And I think as a way of respecting him and honoring him, and my grandma and my mom, that I pay more attention to it now. And the more that I learn, the more I understand that the values that and just understanding what happened when they came over here and what they had to go through, and the trials and tribulations that they went through. If I understand that perspective and what work was put in to get me to this place, they didn't know that, obviously, right? But they did. Mm-hmm. Then I know that my trials and tribulations that I go through now, like I had a big computer glitch overnight and all this stuff, like it caused me to lose. It's nothing, right? It's nothing in comparison. And just to do it and doing that and understand what went through to give me this opportunity that I have now, that I can sit, I'm basically in gym clothes. This is the stuff I'm wearing every day, working out of my house. My dog's right over there. Like I have a nice life that I should be grateful to have, but to understand, to truly be grateful, in my opinion, I have to understand the sacrifices that were given or that were done in order to get me here. And the Armenian history is a critical piece of that.
I love that. For the people that don't know what happened, how could you kind of recap it for our typical US business owner, or just person listening? They don't know much about what happened in Armenia, why a lot of people that are Armenians are not in Armenia, since the 1900s.
Yeah. I mean, in the there's no real way of sugarcoating it, to put me on the spot a little bit, but there's no real way to sugarcoat it other than there was a genocide. And a lot of every Armenian that I basically meet, we all have the same story. I haven't had the honor of traveling to Armenia to meet family that was there, but we are essentially, I've met several Armenians that are here, or like yourself in Spain, or, you know, around the world. And we all have the same focal point of story, that our families were disrupted in the most horrific way that you could historically do it in any context of anything. The atrocities that were committed were, you know, I don't want to dive deep into that kind of thing, but you can use your imagination, and it's probably worse. And the craziest things to me are the stories that are mostly talked about in terms of genocide. The Armenian Genocide was like a trial run for those, right? A learning lesson for Hitler and things like that, right? Points to it, talks about it, uses it as a case study. And so I don't think it's talked about enough because certain geopolitical things, and mostly in my opinion, but it hopefully gets more spotlights as time goes on. I would say Google it, but I've expressed my frustrations in that area with you, Arman, and you know, I mean, second, third page, you'll probably figure it out if you Google it, and on the first page, you'll figure out why I have frustrations with the words Googling it for this kind of thing. So, yeah, I mean, that's the short story of. There's a reason that we all have similar stories when you talk to us, and it's one of the worst human atrocities on a grand scale that has disrupted an entire country, and the repercussions are felt to this day, for sure.
Totally. You would explain it better because, you know, you're in the US. You know, you kind of can talk to someone on the that's on the ground there and explain a little bit. This was something, just to add something, this was something perpetrated by the Turks, and to this day they don't recognize it. Azerbaijan, which is the same thing as their Turks, still don't recognize it. And you know, there's lots of things to do there, but my point is that there was a month ago came news that Poland is asking Germany for, I think it was over $1 trillion in reparations. That's why they don't want to talk about it. That's why this is not talked about. But yeah, this is it. I think it's just a general culture if you learn about it. But this goes back to, for everyone listening, to, you know, we get to have this life. You know, we have so many people sacrificed. You know, I had family members, my ancestors were killed because they were too capitalistic. I won't go into details, but they were too capitalistic, and, you know, they were sent to Siberia, basically. So ultimately, well, we are here and we don't have to deal with that. And so it's just a little bit of a discussion with you, Matt, on, you know, wow, like, we're not in that situation. Any, as you said before, like, any problems or troubles we have now is nothing compared to, you know, what our ancestors went through.
Yeah, I mean, I think at the core of it, I look at myself as coming from a long line of not only survivors, but people who thrived, right? My ancestors that came over here, it was 12. The crazy thing is, I've told you this story before personally, but I don't know what year. There's barely any kind of record. It kind of fell between. I don't know what year they came over here. I can kind of, you know, pinpoint it a little bit. But what I do know is my great grandfather, I think is the way I would say it. I always forget that. But he came over here. It was a 12-year journey of going back and forth. He came over, made money, went back, because he couldn't make money back in Armenia or Turkey. And so he came here, made money, went back, somehow found family members and friends, paid for them to get onto the boat, went back, did it again for 12 years. And you don't do that without being, I talk a lot about mental discipline. We obviously have the same mentor that talks about a lot of it. We talk about mental discipline of being able to hold your shit together under that conditions for 12 years. That's, again, everything I go through pales in comparison to that. And then every single generation after that, including myself now, has had small business owners, with the exception, well, no, that's not true. So every single generation of my Armenian family has had a small business owner. And I think, you know, you told me this, which I thought was the coolest thing ever. There's a high percentage in comparison to other groups of people, small business owners in Armenia. I just think of, you know, what do we go through as small business owners? You know, basically the more mentally tough people thrive as a business owner, and you have to, because of the things that you go through. Like when I started, that thing that I just kind of brushed over this morning would have crippled me for like a day or two, right, mentally. And as I've grown and and understanding my Armenian history has been a huge part of that and what they've gone through. And so I say, hey, I can push myself. I pushed myself over the last 2 years since COVID specifically. And now it's just like, it barely disrupted my morning. I literally saw it, figured it out, went over to my computer, fixed it, got back into my morning routine and went on my morning walk like that. A couple of years ago, like I said, would have disrupted me. Now, I only mention this because it's such a, it's my way, it's in its own small little world is how I'm honoring my ancestors that went through all these trials and tribulations, because I'm not wasting the opportunity that they afforded me. Right. I'm not letting small things, you know, how do you not let history repeat itself? Everything's got to be in perspective. Right. So like, you have to understand, like, okay, they figured it out. I have a, you know, very nice laptop, some phones. I got connections. I can Zoom with somebody that's in Spain. Like, you can figure it out. Right. You can figure it out. Half my teams across the world, like your trials and tribulations aren't that hard. And I think the biggest amount of disrespect that we could give to our ancestors that went through that is not taking advantage of the opportunity that they worked so hard to give us. They knew, that's why I love this country so much. I know you're in Spain, but it's the same thing, right? But he tried so hard to get all of his family over here because he knew what he was bringing them to. Maybe he didn't know what eventually would happen, but the opportunity, land of opportunity. Home of the brave. That moniker maybe needs some reworking, but certainly back then, right? There was the 12 years back and forth on the boat, not knowing if once he arrived, he was just gonna, you know, he saw his sister get beheaded before he left the first time, and he went back over and over and over and over again, not knowing what he was going to find on the other side. I don't have an inkling or a minuscule amount of that kind of struggle, that pain, that grit that he went through in order to do that. So if I can try to honor him the best way possible, it's by getting this, you know, not waste. I got 2 little girls now, then they're going to learn the exact same thing that I've learned now, because they're, you know, 25% Armenian. That's still enough to, you know, make sure that doesn't skip down to the next, you know, miss and get forgotten about. So the moral of the story is, like, you gotta know the history, and then honor it is the only path forward through your actions on a daily basis.
I love this. This is such a good video to send to, you know, I mean, America is, you know, there is no, I mean, maybe the Indians, there is no American, 100% Americans, right? We're all Irish or English, Polish, whatever, right? German. And so we all can relate to this message of remember your identity. You remember the struggles that they went through. The only way, you said honor, right? One thing that I think complements what you're saying is, what would, in our case, what would the enemy want? What would our enemies in the past, or actually today, what would they want? First of all, they would want us weak, complaining all day, whatever, right? That's one thing. The second thing they would want us is to forget and not talk about and not remember and not expand our identity and our values and what we've gone through. Because if,
Yeah.
how many, like there's Armenians that don't know that genocide happened. There's Armenians that don't know that we're sadly still at war. There's some war skirmishes. It's actually a freaking war happening 2 weeks ago for 2 days. And the enemy wants us to forget. And what we have to do is totally the opposite, is remember, expand, tell everyone about it. And I love what you said also when you said not only survive but thrive. I love that, because yes, we have been known as survivors, but it's time that it's not only survivors and we become thrivers as well.
Yeah, 100%.
And there's so much surviving. Okay, great, you're a great survivor, awesome. But when is time to thrive? Because you cannot stay as a survivor for ages. That's great, but some nations don't even exist right now that lived with our Armenians. But it's also time to thrive. I love your words there too.
Yeah, because like, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head, right? Surviving is not the answer, because in a certain sense, if you just say, you know what, I'm alive, like that could certainly 100% work as a rationale under what they went through. But we're here. I'm in, one of the, in Missouri, at least, I'm in one of the safest neighborhoods now in Missouri. I have no excuses. I have like in America, relatively, my country, my city, my state, everything, I'm fine. If I'm just sitting here surviving, I'm not over there in Armenia with the threat of war, or someone beating down my door. Like, there's no excuse to just sit by and say, you know what, I'm honoring them through surviving. No, it's like you have to utilize the opportunity that you were given, because they didn't just, they didn't just do it. I don't see my grandpa as someone who worked his ass off at Boeing here in St. Louis and scrapping by. He didn't just do it so that my mom could survive. He did it so that she could have a better life than what he had. And in order to do that, you have to thrive, right? My mom did the exact same thing. Trust me, I'm 6 foot, almost 6'3" and 250 pounds. I got 3 other brothers that are just like me. And my little old mom, who's about 5'4", kept our asses in shape, right? And in line, right? And she worked her ass off more than probably anybody. Certainly more than me. I just push buttons all day long, right? It's not that hard of work. What she did was hard, right? And so, I think she worked her ass off to provide us with the opportunity that we had. I like this as the definition of self-made. Like, a lot of people say self-made, and I have a poster up in my office that's the American flag, and it says self-made. I bought it after I exited my company, and a lot of people think, well, self-made is like a bad thing. I'm like, no. Self-made, in my definition, means that I'm recognizing the hard work that my parents, my ancestors gave, they put in to give me the opportunity to be self-made. Of course, my education, that was provided for me, my home and shelter, they wanted me to get right ready for that moment to, like, okay, it's on you now. They weren't there with me when I was, starting a business or anything like that, but they were, in the sense that all of that leading up to that focal point, that surviving maybe, was done so in that moment that I could switch and flip over into a thrive mode. And that's where I think, to say survive and thrive, like, you have to go out and seize the opportunity that was afforded to you, whatever that may be. Every one of my brothers that I mentioned, we all have different paths, but we're all trying to do the same kind of thing I'm talking about, is thrive in the opportunity and recognize that we were given this thing that, still to this day, certainly back then that didn't have, but still to this day that a lot of people don't have. I think focusing on, another thing that what you said is, what can we learn as a country? Like, we have, as Armenians, and have an opportunity to not let things happen again. Because, like you said, they want you to forget about it. But the reason they want you to forget about it is so similar people can do similar shit. Exactly what Hitler said, right? Look what happened to the Armenians. Nobody remembers them, right? He was saying, I'm just going to do this again because look at the end result. Right, I slaughtered his words, but that's essentially what he was saying. Back then, it was easy to tuck things under the rug, right? With no internet and everything like that. So people that have ulterior motives will let you. I mean, again, the Young Turks is a YouTube channel, a YouTube TV. I could flip it on a TV behind me and pull up something called the Young Turks. It's almost so they want you to forget about it so much, they're almost putting it into your face, right? Like, oh, that's why it's on page 2 of Google now. It's like, oh, it's the Young Turks. What are you talking about? You know, if you Google it, it's a TV channel. It had nothing to do with anything in history, right? So like you and I can remember it, but that's why we have to be vigilant in this kind of shit, and then don't let it happen again, because it will, because it's happened throughout history, right? So it's just a moment of opportunity for some people in this world. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot there, but yeah, I mean, it's a lot to think about for sure.
Yeah, I wanna end. I don't know if I'll attach it later, but I just saw a TikTok the other day, laughed my ass off, because it was a young guy, like Latino guy, calling his father and saying, "I'm depressed," and the father was saying, we're immigrants, we don't have depression," and,
Yeah.
and that resonated so much. I laughed what dumb stuff you're talking about. We don't have depression. But like, if you put yourself right now, like all immigrants, I'm now talking to all immigrants, you put yourself now, right now, and you take a look back at your ancestors and you say, they should be the ones depressed, like, I don't have nothing to be depressed about. And obviously there's some things there's some things that can affect, but it's, I want everyone just listening that's an immigrant, has an immigrant background or not, to think about the huge opportunity they've been given, and to seriously consider doing the most out of it.
Yeah, I mean, it reminds me kind of that hard times produce hard men. I forget the exact phrase there, but then good times produce weak men. At the end of the day, man, I think what ends up happening. It's not to say that anybody's in particularly weak, but I think that the society as a whole wants you to be weak in certain regards, right? Especially here in the United States, people have arguments about a guy being too manly. And it's not even that like extreme thing. And it's just things online of toxic masculinity ends up being like opening the door for a woman or something like that, right? So it's like there's extreme versions of it, of that for sure. But the general guideline is, I think a lot of the depression is the stuff of, again, like a lack of perspective, a lack of foresight, of thinking of like, hey, look, I have an opportunity here in front of us. I'm certainly not one that has to say that like I'm an expert on that kind of topic at all, but and I have battled with like feeling that kind of stuff before. But what I know is most of the time that is strived, at least for me personally, let's put it that way, a safe way of saying it is that it's derived from a lack of knowing where I'm going, a lack of knowing the mission, a lack of knowing what the next step is, and at least having like the goal and the opportunity in the forefront of my mind. Because if you can do that, so let's put it in business standpoint, right? All right, so it just personal anecdote. I'm in a basement right now. We just completed it. That I've had this in my head for 10 years. I talk about this on my social media right now. I've been working towards. There's a theater, a gym. This is a bar. My wife has a wine room over there. This is a nice basement. I've been working towards this every day for 10 years. Right? Sorry, my dog was doing a little crazy stuff over there. So I've been working for this every day for 10 years, including the house. I actually had a house that I visualized, like I'm going to own this house. And I have side-by-side images of that house 7 years ago and this house. They almost look identical to each other.
Wow.
And so in business, that was what was able to give me the mission of every day of like bad or good. I'm moving. Am I progressing myself forward? Am I working my way there? realizing it's not going to come, unrealistic expectations. Oh, I can't believe I'm not in that big house already after working for 2 days, right? But in life, like, what is our opportunity, right? Like, I have my goals that I'm going to do for my daughters and our family in my head as well, that forefront. It's not, and not something I'm just like, oh, Matt can do that. It's an acquired skill that you have to work on over time. Because again, let's draw it back to, our ancestors, or the 12-year journey of my great grandfather doing that. Do you think he didn't have the objective in mind that whole 12 years, knowing it would, if it could have took, 2, could have took 10, could have took 50. The objective was in mind, and he didn't slow down the entire time, right? And so I think a lot of the time when people talk about depression, I think that that's what it is. It's a lack of focus, or lack of knowing what's down the road and being willing to put in the work. I actually think a lot of times immigrants, at least in this country, are the hardest working people, because they know the opportunity that's in front of them, and they just came through the hardest things in life to get here in order to realize it, right? Maybe because they didn't have that opportunity in the country that they left. And I think that's been a true American thing for a very long time, probably true throughout the world, but I only have so much perspective. But that depression, I think, just comes from that lack of focus. And again, just to go back to our society, I think a lot of the times, I mean, look at TikTok. Like, people, I advertise on TikTok, and the TikTok will tell you, like, hey, look, you have to have really good ads that only last 3 seconds. If it's any longer than that, people can't pay attention anymore. It's like, that's just how the society is being conditioned at the moment, is this lack of focus, lack of knowing where you're heading. And that's part of the reason that, things fall apart with stuff like this.
Totally. Yeah. There's so much stuff to touch there, but just, if you remember your roots and you learn about them, take time, everything, you basically recover your hidden strength. You just putting into words what you just said. So that's it. I just want people just to live with this great message that Matt, you and I have just talked about, and to reflect on it. And, maybe we do more of this in the future. So thank you so much for listening. Share, and we'll talk another time. Thank you.
Take care, guys.